made waves 2 years in a row by having their spring game on a Thursday night. But could they change the way they recruit in the spring going forward? We brought on Blake Alderman to talk about and evaluate their spring recruiting. Let's jump right into it. Blake, how do you feel the spring game went this year from a recruiting perspective when you consider the talent that Florida had on campus?
Anytime you land a five-star commit, it goes pretty well. You get a Xavier Fields to me there in the fold. A prime position of need. Florida needs safeties. You can look how they've, tinkered with safeties like R.J. Moten in the transfer portal. So obviously that carries over to the high school ranks of them. Like I said, trying to rebuild that defensive back there. So, anytime you get a high-level commit, it's successful. I think that compared to last year's spring game, I thought the spring visitor list was a little bit more successful maybe than this year. Obviously there are different factors this year. Again, it's on a Thursday night, but same thing there. But, heading into the week, I remember watching the weather app, and it looked like it was like an 80% chance of rain or something like that heading that thing. Like, if I didn't have to go to that game for my job, I don't know that I would really wanted to go to it either, because standing outside in the rain did not sound very fun. And I can picture myself in high school telling my mom, like, hey, let's go to the spring game. It's an 80% chance of rain on a Thursday and you got work tomorrow. My mom would probably smack the crap out of me. So I don't think that would work out well for me. But, I think all things considered, it being on a Thursday and at night, and obviously people having to work, as far as parents and transportation, I think that the visitor list went well. I think that, I'm curious to see how that would have changed or been different if it was on a Saturday. That's something that obviously we can't tell. But, I think overall, would I petition for Florida to have it on a Thursday going forward? Probably not. I'd probably have them, have it on a weekend, for the fan base to be there and make a better environment. You're not going to sell out the crowd for a spring game typically, but you're going to have a little bit more, fans in the stands there if it was on a Saturday compared to a Friday, or excuse me, a Thursday. But, I think that, that would be the smart move for me, is to move it for the weekend. But, again, they had a nice turnout of recruits there. But, Florida's had a nice turnout of guys from the entire point of their spring, camp that they had. They spread it out there. So, I think overall their entire spring was successful. Would I have liked to see a couple more kids there for the spring game? Absolutely, but, I think all in all, whenever you land a five-star commit, and you have other guys that show up that are top targets for them, it went fairly well.
I feel like if you have to say all things considered, it was a nice turnout. That maybe they should be going back to the drawing board for next year, but we will see. But you did mention the commitment from Xavier Filsamy, but it's been fairly quiet over the second half of the month. Do you think the staff was expecting maybe bigger waves coming out of that game?
I don't know. I think that was the guy that was, Filsamy had the most buzz of possibly making a decision there. They started out, there in the spring, picking up some buzz with some guys, getting some guys on campus there. I think that as they continue to get out and about during the spring evaluation period, they're going to continue to, get some film on these guys and watch them when they're in practice. Kind of maybe more so solidify their recruiting board of, guys that they can get in-person evaluations on, so I really don't ever push the panic button on where your class sits until at the end of summer. You just have seen so many of these guys that they make their decisions there after their gigantic wave of official visits in June. And then you've got that last week there in July for any guys that want to take some unofficial visits to kind of, cross their T's and dot their I's. So I always look at where the nucleus of your class is whenever you're heading into the end of summer there. So we'll see there. But, as far as buzz, coming out of the spring game, I don't know that I really expected any more guys to commit there. Jordan Pride was one that I had to keep an eye on. I don't know. I never had anything saying like, this guy's going to commit. This guy, watch out for this guy. It was just more of, kind of reading the tea leaves, so to say, of a guy that decommits, turns around and visits a school that he's been, rumored to be trending to. That was more of just kind of, like I said, read the tea leaves there. But, I wasn't really expecting any more commitments outside of Filsamy after that spring game.
All right, so we talked about what your thoughts were, but let's chat about the staff. If you had to predict what they were going to do with the spring game next year, do you envision them changing anything going forward? Do you think, we know that there was a little bit of a drop off from last year to this year. I think some of that could potentially be contributed to the fact that, fans want to come out and see a UF coach's first spring game, right? Like Urban Meyer's first one was packed. Will Muschamp's first one was packed. Everybody wants to see what the new staff brings to the table. So I guess maybe it being year two, there's a little bit less sparkle involved there, but I think majorly it's that there was school on Friday, whereas the year before it was Easter weekend. And so you could go on a Thursday night because you didn't have school or maybe even work on that Friday the next day. So, with all of that information, do you think that the staff will make any changes going forward?
I don't know. From my experience with college coaches and their game planning, they seem to be very much people that are set in their ways. They get into a lane and they drive in it. So I don't know. I would think probably not. But maybe they take things under consideration and they game plan things. We'll see. I would think probably not. You see. Even Billy Napier this past week in or earlier this week in Sarasota was asked about their transfer portal recruiting, how they're a little bit slower with their evaluations and all that. And, he said that, could they, was it something they could have done a little faster? Sure. But the way they evaluate guys is the way they're going to do it going forward. So I feel like if that's something that you're stuck in your ways on and that's what you're going to do, I don't see him changing his mind over when they're having the spring game. So like I said, I think he's a guy that's set in his ways. He's very meticulous in the things he does. I think the reasoning behind them having that spring game on a Thursday was to not have to compete with, school X, Y, and Z for having to, compete against guys showing up on their campus. So I think that appeal of being that only spring game and having not to, try to pull kids every which way of trying to show up to your game and not the other game. I think that's something that Billy Napier likes the most about having on a Thursday. So I think that's why he'll probably keep it that way.
So you mentioned something that Billy said about the transfer portal when he was speaking to the Sarasota Gator Club, and I think that it's interesting because UF only has a couple of scholarships, 4 or 5 scholarships to play with this transfer portal season, and you've got to think when you bring a guy in the transfer portal, you really do need to be super selective because not only does it need to be a position of need because those scholarships are there's very few of them left. But it has to be a guy that's a culture fit because you need him to be able to jump in, buy in, and kind of learn on the fly and hopefully contribute immediately, which I feel like is a little bit different than when you're evaluating a high school recruit. Like they can come in, get groomed into what the system is, learn from the older guys. Transfer portal guys are the older guys generally. They're the guys you want to come in and set an example with. So do you think that maybe that strategy, even though it is a little bit slower, may really be what pays off at the end?
It could. I think that whenever you're doing your due diligence and the fact that, those guys are entering the transfer portal for a reason. Is it because lack of playing time? Is it that they want to, dip their foot in the water of NIL and see if there's any bites for that? So, I think that wondering the why of why somebody is leaving a school, I think is something that, a school will look into. And that's not just a Florida thing. I think that's something across the board of any school, trying to make sure, are you just here for, an NLI boost, or are you here, because you didn't play at, the other school. And if you didn't, were you doing something, were you not working so hard? Did you not buy into the program? Or like you said, a culture fit. Were you a culture fit there? If you're not, are you going to be one here? Mm-hmm. So I think there are a lot of parts of that taking your time does benefit from. You get a chance to, get to know why these guys do what they do as far as playing football or why they left another school. But, the transfer portal is completely different than high school recruiting, like you said. These guys, in high school recruiting, 9 times out of 10, you want to be that last official visit. Mm-hmm. It's the complete opposite with the transfer portal. You want to be that first visit because sometimes these guys take 1 visit, maybe 2, or, could even very well have an idea in their head whenever they enter the transfer portal of, where they want to go. So I think that there's some give and take there. And I think that, the fact that Florida wanted to wait until the transfer portal closed, use that 2-week period of that spring portal window to, compile guys, do some research, figure out, positions they want to, look at, who fits in scheme wise, who fits culture wise. I think that was something that they, kind of had one hand tied behind their back because other schools are setting these visits. And like I said, 1 visit could be all it takes for some of these guys to take an official visit somewhere and settle on where they want to go. So I think that they are learning a little bit more about the transfer portal as it goes on. I think that this spring evaluation period, from listening to what Billy Napier had to say when he was speaking to the Sarasota Gator Club, I think that he's kind of learned that, is he going to take his time to evaluate these guys and is he going to move faster? I don't think so. But I think that maybe the strategy of, getting these guys on campus and, trying to, be a little bit more, faster of, trying to get these guys and at least to throw your hat in the ring. It's like, if you're playing baseball, you at least want to see these guys, strike out swinging, instead of just staring at the ball come at them. So, at least to be in there and giving yourself a fighting chance, I think is something that they need to change at least there.
Well, hopefully they're taking notes and making the improvements, but I do think everybody's kind of learning on the fly with this transfer
Sure.
portal and NIL and all of this stuff. And I do think UF has something to offer in the fact that they have coaches that develop NFL talent. And so if you've got guys coming from smaller schools, let's say like Louisiana, who would like to maybe perform on a little bit bigger stage and be developed by a guy who has the opportunity to develop guys in the past and a track record of putting guys in the NFL, that Florida does have that going for them. But Blake, thank you for joining. Tell people where they can find you and your work.
Yeah, Swamp 24/7. It's the Florida Gators 24/7 sports site. I like we talked about. I've been at Tampa Catholic. I'm going to be hitting some more of these high schools as the spring evaluation period goes on. Spring games when they happen. Transfer portal stuff is still going on. Even Billy Napier said that they envision having some more guys on campus. I think they have somewhere between 4 to 5 spots left to fill in that 85-man roster. So they've definitely got the spots to give. So recruiting never sleeps. It's one of those things where one period may end and it's getting ready to start the next one. So we're gearing up with this busy spring evaluation period and what should be a very busy June official visit period, camp period that they have there. So, it's going to be a fun summer.
It's always recruiting season here for the Florida Gators. Well, I appreciate you, Blake. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much to Blake Alderman from Swamp 24/7 for joining me tonight. We also spoke with Blake about some huge recruiting battles UF is in right now. If you missed that, click right here.